pretty this is. Hi, everybody. Hi. How we all doing? Good? Good. All right. We hope you've had a wonderful day so far. And we have 3 terrific presentations coming up this afternoon. But before we get started on that, I just want to say a couple of things about what we are doing to bring these riches out into the community. I think I've told you this before, obviously. We feel incredibly privileged to be able to do this in Sun Valley, and we couldn't do it without all of you. We are a nonprofit endeavor, and 60% of our income comes from very generous people in this audience, and the other 40%, yes, thank you. And the other 40% comes from pass holders. So that's it. And so everything we get to do, you give us the financial flexibility to do, and we are incredibly grateful. We bring the most engaging speakers that we can find. We invite local students and teachers and librarians to attend these pavilion talks for free. We offer a scholarship program that you may not know about for young men, women, and teachers from Blaine County who are able to enjoy the entire conference for free and take their lessons back to the classrooms. And we had this really fun day earlier in May, with the community library and the support of a wonderful donor. We brought Javier Zamora, who is the author of Solito, and exactly, who spoke here last summer. He went to the middle school. He spoke in Spanish to all of the Spanish immersion students, including the ones who had only been here for a couple of months, and then those who were sort of taking the more advanced classes. He spent the whole day with them, and they asked him questions like, what was the scariest part of your trip? To who is your favorite soccer team? They had just a terrific time together, and it was magical. So it's been a great pleasure to be able to do that. It's wonderful to work with the community library, who is just our partner in so many things. And we're just thankful to all of you. So now, for those of you who may not have met her yet, I'd like to introduce Jenny Emery Davidson, who is the executive director of the community library. Yeah, she's fantastic. Yes. And she has been tirelessly engaged in the work of libraries to make books available to all interested readers. So Jenny is going to come up for a few minutes and introduce Judy Blume and Jeffrey Brown. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Robin. Good afternoon. My name is Jenny Emery Davidson, and I'm the executive director of the Community Library, which is a privately funded public library that's just about a mile down the road here. I invite everybody to visit. Anybody can get a library card there for free. We love partnering with the Sun Valley Writers Conference, and this afternoon I am delighted to introduce 2 iconic figures, Jeffrey Brown and Judy Blume, who for decades now have helped all of us to strengthen our tools of language and imagination to navigate a sometimes baffling world. Jeffrey Brown is an award-winning senior correspondent for the PBS NewsHour, and he is a poet. He has profiled many of the world's leading writers, musicians, actors, artists. He created the NewsHour's online art beat, and he has hosted a nation-spanning book group, Now Read This. Judy Blume, Judy Blume has published 25 books ranging from Super Fudge and Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing and Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret in the 1970s to In the Unlikely Event in 2015. She has been honored with many awards, including the National Book Critics Circle Lifetime Achievement Award and the Eleanor Roosevelt Award for Bravery in Literature. And she was named a literary legend by the Library of Congress. Her books help us explore the mystifying worlds of adulthood, our own changing bodies, and even tragic events that we struggle to understand, such as the crashing of a plane into a neighborhood of children. It turns out that puberty is not the only confusing time in life. And very recently, I have been drawn to a collection that Judy edited and published in 1999, featuring writers whose work had been censored at that time. This book, Places I Never Meant to Be, is helpful to me right now. As just 3 weeks ago, on July 1st, a new law went into effect in Idaho that impacts the fundamental work we do to provide free access to books for everyone. So as we struggle to understand this new law, it has been deeply meaningful for me to turn once again to Judy Blume's words and clarifying reflections, to turn to this essay written some 25 years ago in order to contextualize what is, for me, unfamiliar terrain. It takes humility as well as courage to ask honest questions, to make an earnest effort to understand other people and to understand the ever-changing world and to understand our own conflicted and conflicting selves. It helps to have humor, too. And it helps to have a companion along the way. Judy Blume has given us those things. Both Jeffrey Brown and Judy Blume inspire us to read fearlessly, not in order to find all the answers, but to find unexpected friends and to keep propelling our lives with wonder. Please join me in welcoming Judy Blume and Jeffrey Brown to the stage.
Jenny. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're there.
I'm here.
Judy said we'd come out and I could just plop her into the right chair, right? I didn't even have to, as it turned out. Isn't this a lovely spot?
This is so amazing, and you don't want to make me cry, so thank you all so much for coming. Thank you very much. Thank you. So beautiful.
Well, I told her as a few days ago, and I've been telling her for a few weeks, that when you sit down here, it's pretty spectacular. And I don't want the moment to go past without saying thank you, too. It's such a pleasure to be here. And it's sitting here is hard to beat, right? You all should come up here sometime, maybe. So what I'm hoping is, in my life, as a reader and professionally, I walk through life with a lot of writers, and there are many writers I get to know who are admired, and many, of course, who are well read by the public, by the millions. There are only a handful that are loved, in such a personal way, and this is one of them. So my hope in our time together here is that many of you know the books, but maybe you'll get to know a little bit of the lovely person who wrote those books, okay? And I thought we might start because when we were last together, about a year ago in Key West, there was a movie made of Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And you said to me at the time that it had taken a long time to allow a movie to be made.
Yeah, 50 years.
Yeah. But
Seems like yesterday.
But why?
Because I didn't, not every book has to be a movie. and I didn't want them to make a mess of it. And so, we used to go on Judy Sweetheart lunches. Producers would take me, Judy Sweetheart, let's do the book. And it was like, no. And then after all this time, I got an email, a wonderful and persuasive email from a writer-director whose movie, her last movie, I had actually seen it. She's the first person who ever came to me with such a credential. Mm-hmm. Look, I made this movie, The Edge of 17. I'm like, I love that movie. Mm-hmm. And her mentor is James L. Brooks, mm-hmm. Jim Brooks. Yeah. Some of you know from The Simpsons, and some of you know because he's a fabulous maker of movies. Mm-hmm. And she said, can we come to Key West and try to convince you? And I knew before they got there it was going to be yes. I think there were only two things, and the one I remember is that as long as you set this in 1970, because it just will not work if you try to do it, update it. Mm-hmm. And they said we wouldn't have it any other way. And so we made a movie, and I love it. I'm the only writer who says that movie is better than my book. And I mean it. I think it's wonderful.
Well, I mean, I brought up the movie for two reasons. First, I saw firsthand, it was a movie opening at that lovely theater that you and your husband George, who must be here somewhere.
Yes, where are you, George? Are you here?
George helped
He better be here because sometimes I forget
things. He's right there. He's right there, yeah.
Where is he? There he is.
Yeah.
Sometimes I forget names and things, and I have to call on George.
Okay. So I saw firsthand hundreds of people waiting outside. And, at a movie opening, they're all there waiting for the movie stars. In this case, Rachel McAdams and, some major figures. But they were all there for you. Because they all had remembered reading that book, and then as I was interviewing some of them, and people were just going through every single book. This has been your experience for a long time, right? People coming up to you, people.
I'm very lucky, and I've had to try to figure it out, and what I think it is people who meet me who are now grown up, who read the books as kids. I represent their childhoods. And so there's a lot of teariness at these meetings. And, childhood is really important. You don't get rid of the kid who was inside you. You carry that kid forever with you. And so I think that's what it is.
But I also picked that book because it was seminal for you. I mean, the theme of this conference of origin stories. Do you remember the Judy Blume sitting down to write that book?
Yes.
Who was she?
I remember everything.
You do? That's scary, but who was she?
Well, she was a young woman. I had no idea what I was doing. I published 2 forgettable books before Margaret. Although Charlemagne the God would be very angry at me because his favorite is Iggy's House, and that was my second book.
Yeah.
But I was learning to write. It was a learning experience, and then it was like, I'm just going to sit down and tell the truth, be honest, what I remembered about being on the cusp, being in 6th grade.
Did you have that actual thought? I mean,
forget all the rules and regulations. I had taken a course, and I love that woman who taught the course, but she was old world, and she had rules and regulations. Mm-hmm. Everything has to be tied up neatly at the end. Children can't eavesdrop. What? Of course they have to eavesdrop. But she was wonderful, and she was supportive to me always, even after she read Margaret. She was, ooh.
But so you
sorry about that. I forgot.
Oh, go ahead.
Slipped.
But you said to yourself, I'm going to just tell it the way I remember it.
Again, I didn't know anything. How did I learn to write? By reading. And that's what I tell, everybody who asks me, especially kids. I'm going to be a writer when I grow up. How do you learn to write? Because you read and you love to read. And that's how you learn to write. So I was inspired. I was inspired by Beverly Cleary. I was inspired by Louise Fitzhugh's Harriet the Spy.
Uh-huh.
I was inspired by E.L. Konigsberg's first book, which is a very long title, but it was a very good book. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to write books like that. And a funny thing, so when I started out, series of books, which have become so popular now, everybody's writing series. Series were out. And fantasy, George and I both grew up loving the Oz books.
Yeah.
Fantasy, out.
Right.
Today, of course, it's all series and it's all fantasy.
Yeah.
So it's cyclical.
Yeah.
What happens.
But all of those books that you cited, and I think all of us can remember reading those, they did not address the things that you started to address.
Yes.
Yes. So what happened? Why you loved those books and you saw them as models, and you said, I want to be a writer and I want to write books like that, but I also want to tell some kind of truth.
Who knows how things happen? I was obsessed for a year in my life with, wanted to get my period. I wanted to get breasts. I did all those exercises that Margaret does. I'll tell you the funniest story. Can I tell you the funny story? So when they were filming Margaret and I was there on set, Kelly, the writer-director, and I know better than to talk to the director while we're on the set, but I was watching on a monitor with other people, and the way she taught the kids to do it was like anaerobic. What do you say? When you do it like this, I must increase my bust. And I'm like, oh my God, that is so wrong. Well, we can't let that happen. And so I had a lovely woman next to me. She was kind of my liaison to Kelly.
Yeah.
And I said, Julie, and she said, I know. And she ran back and told Kelly. By then,
No, wait a minute. So what's the right way to do it?
I must.
Okay.
We all know the right way to do it.
I'm not going to let you not tell us or show us. Yeah.
And so then Kelly said, oh, God, I had no idea. Because how would she know? She was a kid. She did what she thought was right. Seemed to have worked for her.
Yeah.
Better than for me. And so Kelly had me teach the kids to do it. That was great fun.
But did you know that you right away were on to something? Was there...
No. I knew that I don't know what I knew.
Yeah.
But I think I knew that I wanted to bring puberty into it because it was so important to me. And I would have loved to have had a book and read about real kids and their feelings about puberty.
What I was thinking about this word origins, your origin story, but you're really writing about the origin when many of us become who we are, in a sense, right? That between period that somehow still fascinates you.
I always like that period. And when people say, oh, she writes YA books, I'm like, no. First of all, there was no such thing when I started to write. That came way, way later. And my books are kids on the cusp, most of them. Mm-hmm. Maybe Forever's YA, but most of them were kids on the cusp.
Yeah. Because, what is it about that moment?
Because it was a really important moment for me, so I have to assume it was. It's also kind of the moment when you look at your parents and you realize that they're regular people. Your parents are regular people. Mm-hmm. And that's sometimes hard to, comprehend. Mm-hmm. but it's an important step in growing up.
You should perhaps like set the time and the scene. I mean, there was some of you probably were at the earlier discussion here this morning where Kristen Hanna was talking about her recent book set in the 50s and 60s and the situation for women and somewhat prescribed life that her characters had that she wanted to write about, and then the 60s kind of changing a lot of things.
Well, I started writing in the late 60s, but I guess the first book was published in 69, so I was really an early 70s person, and everything changed. I mean, everything. I was a 50s kid. I grew up, my mother said, you go to college in case, God forbid, you ever have to work, you ever need a job. It's like that was how she saw it. And also, you go to college to meet your husband, because if you don't meet someone in college, where will you ever meet him? And that's what my mother gave me. My father was totally different, and he was go for it. Go for it. There was a time I wanted to be on the stage. Here I am. And he was always go for it. He was my champion.
Which never went away for you, right? I mean,
I lost him really young.
Yeah.
But he's always there.
Yeah.
It's there now.
So, book after, if anyone's reading your books or reading about you, you can sort of go through the books and, I don't know, this one has masturbation and then that one has the teenage sex. And,
right. That's the book about masturbation.
Yeah.
That's the book about getting your period.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Okay.
Because if you were writing about somebody on the cusp, again, like 12 years old, this is part of their lives. This is part of everyone's life. And, I never got the message from my family that sex was bad. I got the message, you better be careful, because if you get pregnant at that time, I knew girls, it changed their whole lives because there was no abortion. And so they had to drop out of school. Very top girls in my high school class. So, I did get that message. Be careful. But no one ever made me feel that it was icky or wrong or that it wouldn't be fun sometime in my life whenever I was ready for it. And I was ready by myself for it before, I didn't go tell my parents. Guess what? I found my special place. I didn't announce that to my parents, but I did to my friends. We all had.
I see everybody knows the reference
we
here.
all had our special places. Yes, Deanie had a special place.
Yes, I know. But nobody told you couldn't also write about these things. I mean,
that's right. Nobody told me.
And so
I didn't know anything. I didn't have a publisher. I didn't have an agent. So, by the time Margaret was published, I didn't have an agent, but I did have, an editor who became the editor who gave me everything, who changed my life. The editor who was so brilliant and knew what I was trying to say and helped me say it as best I could. And we went through from Iggy's house, actually. From Iggy's house all the way to Rachel Robinson. It was the last book that I did with him.
It's easy to sit here on this stage and everybody's with an adoring crowd and millions of books. But when you think about back to the origin, there's no guarantee of that kind of success, right? And in fact, you've said this. There's a lovely documentary in the last year or two, right, about Judy. And you talk about how people even then, as your books were having success, there was a condescension, right? There was, when are you say, I think,
Of
when are you going to
children's
write a
books,
real
right.
book,
Yeah, right.
Judy?
Right.
So
yes.
you ran up against that.
Yes, I did. I also ran up against the woman who called me. This is before the major censorship started in the 80s. This was in the 70s when Margaret was published, and she called my house, and she said, "Are you the one who wrote that book?" And I'm like, "Yes." And she said, "Communist," and she slammed the phone down.
Really? That
So,
was the beginning of a long history,
That
which we're
was-
going to get
yes,
to talk about.
but I never figured out why was I a communist? Was it religion, which is in the book, or was it puberty that made me a communist?
The other thing that clearly started happening for you right away, and this comes out in the documentary, you were touching so many young lives, and they were, just as it is now, it was personal, right? They were writing you letters. So you received, and these were sort of astounding scenes in that documentary, you going through the archive of thousands of letters, and many of them you responded to and developed.
I did.
Yeah,
Yes.
tell
Yes.
everyone about this, because I don't really know any other writer who's had this kind of one-to-one relationship.
Well, there were a lot of letters, and I mean, in the beginning I tried to respond to everyone, and it became so impossible. But every kid who wrote got something. But the personal letters came from kids who really, they were writers. They were able to express themselves. They were able to express their feelings and their problems. And one of them, Lori, Lori grew up part in Seoul in Korea and part in the States. And she was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. She wrote in the style of Louisa May Alcott. "I quake in my boots each time I approach the B shelf of the library." It was actually each time a boy approaches the B shelf in the library, lest he see something he should not. She is now a woman in her 50s with 2 daughters well on their way. Yeah. And Lori and I wrote all these years. I mean, we're still in touch. Yeah. And thanks to that documentary, we had a lovely dinner together with the family. Yeah.
But young people were writing you about their crises in some cases, or their questions. They were using you. Yeah. That must have been a little bit of pressure.
I didn't feel it then. I felt it many, many years later. There was one girl in particular that I developed such a fondness for. I wanted to save her. And that was an impossible situation. And because I was having trouble, and I did feel tremendous pressure then to help as many as I could, I went to a special therapist to help me, because I'm not trained as a therapist, to help people and to separate from them and their problems. And I needed...
You went to a therapist to sort
learn,
of be
to learn, not to be a therapist, but to learn how to deal with this without believing that I could save this child or that child. She helped me a lot with that. She said, "You can be a supportive friend."
And you did.
I did for a lot of kids, yeah.
Yeah. They're also...
But that's not, no. That would never have come out this way, except my papers went to Yale. And when my papers went to Yale, they went with, 170 boxes of letters or more than that. And so these documentarians were able to get in there and read the letters. But that's a whole other thing. That never affected my writing.
I know, but it's part of who you are, and I wanted them to know about this. There was one really funny one that I can't resist. It was a young boy who wrote you, and I wrote it down. He said, "Please send me the facts of life in number order."
That was a girl. Yeah, that was actually a girl.
Oh, that was a girl?
That's a girl.
Okay, excuse me.
Yes, it's okay.
Yeah. Did you respond to that one?
I can't remember how I responded. Here they are, 1 to 10. No, I didn't do that.
Did you ever teach writing? I don't know this.
No. No, I don't know if I would be any good as a teacher. I'm trained, I went to college to become a second grade teacher, but I never taught because, it's a long time ago. We got married early. I was married in college, finished, then got pregnant, had 2 babies by the time I was 25. We all did that in the 50s. It was like, we did it. It's what was expected of us, I think. And only later did many of us, a lot of friends, understand that they needed more. For me, it was a creative kid. I was a really creative kid growing up, and I had plenty of outlets as long as I was in school. And suddenly I was home, and I had 2 little kids, and I liked taking care of them, but something major was missing. Something really big was missing, and I didn't know what it was going to be. It could have been anything, but I was home with the kids, and I had pencils, and I had paper, and I had an old typewriter, and maybe it would have been something else today. I don't know. But I always had the stories.
Yeah.
In a way, I was always a writer, because when I was 9, I had my pink Spalding ball. Anybody remember Spalding balls, those pink rubber balls? Somebody here must remember Spalding. Thank you. And I had a brick house, and just like that wall, I would stand outside and I would throw the ball, bounce, catch, bounce, catch, bounce, catch. But that's not what was really happening. Inside my head were the stories, and they were not cute stories about children. No.
They were not.
No, they were not.
So, I've asked you partly about whether you ever taught, because I'm wondering what advice you would give to people. I'm thinking, you got all these letters from young people asking about advice, life advice. You must also have gotten letters asking about writing advice. So what?
Writing advice is, if you're doing a novel, I don't know exactly what it is if you're doing nonfiction. If you're doing a novel, it's one scene at a time, one little scene at a time, because otherwise it's too overwhelming. I tell this to kids who ask me. It's too overwhelming to think of a whole book, but one little moment at a time, and it builds up.
So these stories that you're talking about that were inside you, they were in some part you, right?
No, not when I was 9 years old.
Oh, not 9.
They were much more melodramatic.
Oh, I
They
see.
were not about kids.
Yeah.
They were in my fantasy land of what the adult world was. Because really, I don't know if it's true today, but when I was growing up, the fantasy was to be an adult. To be an adult and have that kind of freedom. You don't have that freedom as a kid. You don't get to choose if your parents split up or if you're moving to another town. You don't get to make those decisions. It's hard enough as an adult that we get to make our decisions, but we're supposed to.
Yeah. But we were in the car last night going to dinner, and I overheard you say, and since I'm a journalist, I can just use it because I overhear things and say. So I think you said one of your favorites is starring Sally J.
Because I
Friedman.
was sitting next to Pamela Paul, and she said that's her favorite. And I said, of course, I love Sally, too, because it's my most autobiographical story. It's the kind of kid I was, with stories. Yeah.
Do you have, so that's a favorite? When you look back
Well, I
now?
don't like to say favorites because, they're when I look at the whole shelf of books that I've written,
Yeah.
each one has a story that goes with it. For me, a personal story. So it's hard to pick and choose, but I like Sally.
So when at a certain point you also start writing books for adults. Now, did you ran up against resistance at that point as well, right?
You will ruin your career if
Really?
you do this. And if you're going to do it, you must use another name.
Use another name.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Why didn't I? I don't know. I thought that's not radically honest. Is that the name of the show today? I just felt that was dishonest. I've written about the kid inside me, and finally I think I became a woman. Took me a long time to get there. And I had other stories I wanted to tell. Some of them were very naughty. The first one was very naughty, and I was told that would be the end of my career.
Yeah. That actually was pretty naughty.
It's pretty naughty.
Yeah.
It's fun. I got a poem. Oh, God, I hope I can remember.
You're talking about Wifey, right?
Wifey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a poem from a guy, and it said, you're rude and crude. Now I'm not going to be able to remember it. You're rude and crude. No, that's later. You're rude and crude.
George, we need you up here. Perplexed and oversexed?
It ends with you're vexed, perplexed, and oversexed. So when can we have lunch? Yeah, I like that.
I did have the mad idea the other day that it's been interesting the last couple of days how we sort of talk a little bit about what's going on in the world right now, and then we don't.
A lot,
yeah.
We're going to remember today.
Yeah,
all of us are going to remember.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be me we remember. It's going to be what's happening out there today.
But I did have the mad idea briefly that you and I would sit here, and given all that's going on in the world, we would sit here for 45 minutes and just talk about sex.
Oh.
And then we'd open it up to questions, and there'd be 15 minutes of questions about sex. Because everybody wants to escape.
Okay.
Okay?
No.
But the last, is it the last book in the Unlikely Event?
Yes, my favorite. You want to know my favorite of the adult books? I mean, that was a book that I just feel I was meant to write. That was a story I was meant to tell. And why, as a novelist, fiction writer, did I wait 40 years to tell a story that was deep inside me, that happened in my town when I was 14 years old? And for that book, I got to do a lot of research. And what I discovered was research is so much fun. Why did I wait so long to do a book that required research? I loved it.
Why did you wait so long?
I was writing contemporary fiction. I didn't really need research. I had my own ideas and imagination and memories. But for this book, I needed research. And even though my memories of what happened in my town when I was 14 were very clear, I still did all the research. It took 5 years to do the book. And when I finished it, so it's going to have its 10th anniversary. So when I finished it, I must have been, 76, right? And 5 years. And I said to George, anybody else who would listen, I'm done. I am done. I don't want to be locked up for another 5 years. And I was so lucky because right then, the idea for a bookstore fell out of the sky and became a real possibility. And so, lucky me, I get to go to work in a bookstore.
I want to talk about the bookstore and about the situation of books, but just this sense of aging as a writer and as a person, and then writing that book, which became so important to you, and then making a decision. It's not you really made a decision, I'm done.
I did.
Yeah.
And I meant it.
But not everybody
and
has
I don't regret it.
Yeah, but not everybody knows when to stop.
I know. This is what I thought. This is what I thought.
I'm not talking about just writing. I'm talking about everybody and whatever we do.
I thought.
Maybe I'm very personal here. When to stop?
Well, I thought for years and years and years that writers never retire. We don't retire. Why would a writer retire as long as we can tell stories? But what I learned as I grew older was I don't want to be a Philip Roth here who, he also hung it up when he was, 80, I think, and said, the torture is over. And there is a lot of that, it's painful. It's hard. And I look back at the books, and I know how important it was to me as a young woman to be able to write them and then to have them published. I mean, that was a fantasy, that was a dream. Someday maybe it will be published, and then someday maybe somebody will actually read it, and that, goes on. And being able to do that, it changed my life. It gave me everything, something that I desperately needed. And I never thought that I would stop. But
Until you did.
I did, and it was. I wanted to go out on that book.
So the next chapter which you're in now, is as a bookstore owner in Key West.
No, not an owner, founder. Oh. It's a nonprofit. It
belongs,
okay. Belongs
you're
to the
big,
what? It belongs to the big arts.
Oh, good.
You were there.
Okay, but you're.
George and I founded it.
Founder, okay. Mm-hmm. But you are now. This is your thing now.
Yes.
Which you now love. But we're in a period, and we'll get to some serious issues here about how books are seen, and some books are taken off shelves.
But not in my bookstore.
Right.
Actually, if you want to get into that,
yep.
It isn't. We have not been picketed. We live in Key West, which we like to pretend is not Florida. Unfortunately, we have the same governor. And, this morning, George and I went to Jim Shapiro's session, which was wonderful. And at the end, he read something that Governor DeSantis of Florida had just put out, and he just cut off all money for the arts, for the entire state, even though his own legislature had passed this, that the millions of dollars were going to the arts. But DeSantis called it stuff. We don't need this stuff. And cut off all money for the arts, which is, it's shocking. And it's terrible. And it's serious. And this is where we are. This is what can be happening.
There are a few people more uniquely qualified to look at this moment than you, because you have been living it for a long time at different phases.
Yes, I went through it in the 80s.
Yeah.
The 80s, I don't know any of you remember, but the 80s, following the presidential election of 1980, which wasn't as terrible even as what's going on now, the censors came out of the woodwork, and it was like, okay, it's our turn. And, and they wanted to get rid of everything.
You were one of the key targets.
Well, I was,
yep.
Yes. Do you remember Phyllis Schlafly? Phyllis Schlafly put out a booklet, and I had my secretary send away for it because I heard about this booklet. And it was called How to Rid Your Schools and Libraries of Judy Blume Books. And it was serious stuff. And until I found organizations that were working on this, the National Coalition Against Censorship. And I mean, it's really what I say about today. Today is worse. The 80s were terrible. It was awful. And I would say today is worse and scarier because so much of it's coming from government, not from Phyllis Schlafly's, but although, you know, moms for liberty.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know you get asked about this all the time. So what do you advise? How do you respond?
I just want to say to the audience, don't be complacent. Speak out when this is happening, you know? And if you don't know who to speak out to or what to do, join some of these organizations that are doing a fabulous job. And one of them is National Coalition Against Censorship. And PEN America this year has just done a great, great job. They have even opened an office in Miami because the Florida situation is so bad and getting worse. And, you know, send them $5, $10, whatever you can. It's going to help them. Mm-hmm. But also, you know, if you can go to school board meetings, whatever, go. There are 2 moms in, they're outside of Miami. I forget where they are. And they just hated what was going on. And they started on their own. And they have become a real force. On their own, they said, we've got to do something. So we all have to do something. Now, otherwise, it's not going to go away. We're going to lose books. Mm-hmm. Kids are going to lose out. It's mostly kids' books that they're after, although, of course, they're after Margaret Atwood because her books are read by high school kids. So, you know, we have a very small store, but I have a table with yellow, our manager put yellow caution tape all around it. And we, you know, constantly change the books, the banned books.
You know, I want to open this up because there's going to be a lot of questions, but my last question would be, and I hesitate to ask because I don't want to end up on a bummer here, but I mean, given what you've just said, and I also think about the changing world for young people about reading with, you know, the phones we all have and social media, and how much are they reading at all? Are you hopeful, fearful as we sit here today? How?
You know, I'm a hopeful person, for better or worse for me, but so I like to be optimistic about it. And I say to kids, you have to know how to read or you're not going to be able to do your social media, right? You have to know how to read. You have to know how to write. There are still lots of kids who want to read, who love to read. And when kids come into the bookstore and they want graphic novels, and many of them do now, and the parents or the grandparents are judgmental, I cringe because I think you cannot be judgmental. If a kid wants to read a book, I don't care if it's Dog Man or Captain Underpants or what it is. It's a book. It has words in it. And let them start there and hope that they will move on to what their parents call real books.
All right. Well, then I'm glad I asked the questions because you're hopeful. Let's open this up. I think we have John. You wanna? Okay.
Yeah, there we go. I'm on the stage with Judy Blume. That's pretty cool.
Yes, you are.
Everything I know about women. No kidding.
No,
Seriously.
You have, John.
You know that's true,
you
Judy.
You have to tell them what you told me. Everything you know about women.
Yeah. All right. Moving right along.
Now we need to get Alexandra up here, too.
Wait, all right. Moving on. That was a mistake. Questions. Hold your hands very high, please. There are a lot of folks here. Yeah, over there on the left.
And you can ask anything. I'll tell you anything.
Okay. do you have any tips for keeping the radical honesty and joy of writing once it goes from a just for fun thing to a career thing, and there are more like eyes and expectations on your work?
Okay, somebody has to tell me what that was. Do I have any tips?
Could you repeat
Do
that,
I have
please?
any
I can
tips
repeat
for?
it.
I didn't hear it
I
all
didn't hear it so
properly.
well either.
Could you,
Say
could you
it.
repeat it,
Yeah.
please?
Okay. Is this working? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
I'm
it's
gonna be loud
working.
and clear. Do you have any tips for keeping the joy and radical honesty in writing once it goes from just for fun to a career, and there are more eyes and expectations on your work?
That's a really interesting question. Because if you can't keep the joy and the fun and whatever it is about it that makes you do it, you're going to be done for. How do you keep it? Every book is a new beginning, and it's exciting. You know, what I've always done is I keep a notebook with zillions of notes in no order. You know, I'm a doodler, but at least when I sit down to really start the new book, I have my security blanket, which is that notebook. I never have to face a blank screen or a blank, piece of paper, because I have things to pull from, and I keep doing that. And yeah, I never, thought of it that way as, from just enjoying it to it being a career. When you're writing, I've told this to a lot of people, you've got the critic on one shoulder and the censor on the other shoulder, and you've got to get rid of them. You've got to get them out of your room. I know people who write terrible reviews of their own books as they're writing them. And you got to get rid of that, or you just can't do it. You have to make yourself free. You are in charge in that room. Nobody else. I
Thanks.
hope I could answer that.
Is there hands down here? There's a woman in a blue shirt in the second row. Thank you.
You were asked what was your favorite book, and you said your last book. What is your last book?
Oh, that was, it's not my favorite, but it's very special to me. That is In the Unlikely Event. That's an adult novel, very complicated. It's interesting. As I got older, I liked the more complicated books better than the ones that made me famous, which were quite, simple. They were told from one point of view, and they were shorter. And then I got into this. I really like this complicated stuff and many points of view and many characters. So many characters in that book that I said to my editor, publisher, Carol Barron, when it was going to come out, I said, I think we should do one of those legends in the front where you name the characters and who they are. And she said to me, Judy, this is not a Russian novel. But when it was coming out in paperback, she said, guess what? We're going to put that in the book to make it easier.
Thanks.
So,
Other questions? Right over here.
Right here.
About a third of the way up the hat.
Oh.
where point to me?
In the middle.
Yeah.
In the middle there.
Yeah.
Oh, hi.
Hi, Judy. I'm from Naples, and I just want to let you know that DeSantis, the arts funding was eliminated for the poorer regions of Naples and East Naples, but not for the wealthier regions.
Are you kidding? Is that possible?
Yeah. The African American, Hispanic sections, in the East Naples, sad to say. But anyway, so my wife and I are sailors, and so we'll sail down from Marco to Antiope Galleon, and always stop by your shop on the way to West Marine, and it's just a gem. Are there any thoughts about how you can expand that model to other communities and share that just beautiful
No,
gem.
you know that we are affiliated and mentored by Mitchell Kaplan, who is here. He's on the board.
Yes, there he is.
Is he here today? Oh, look at that! The best guru mentor that anybody could have, because for several years in Key West, George and I have been there like 30 years. When we got to town, there were 5 bookshops, and then they closed one by one. They all closed until we had next to nothing. We had one used bookstore left. And we would say to Mitchell, who has bookstores in Miami, Mitchell, you have to come down and open a store in Key West. And George would go around finding possible storefronts, but it never could work. It's a long way from Key West to Miami. It's like 4 hours by car. And rents were exorbitant. And Mitchell said, you and George are going to have to figure out a way to do this. And if you can, I will be your mentor. I will be your affiliate. And George did, because there was a wonderful arts center that was opening. It had a storefront, blah, blah. And anyway, Mitchell sent us refurbished shelves and sent us 3 people to teach us how to be booksellers. And before we got any books out of the boxes, we had people coming in. They were so hungry for a bookstore. They were taking books out of the boxes. And it's like, oh, my God, how do we sell them? What do we do? And we had to learn very, very fast. And it's a thrill to learn something new, at whatever age we were. It's 8 years old now, our bookstore, and it's doing so well. And we are a nonprofit arm. And we are called Books and Books, as Mitchell's shops are. And it's doing well enough so that we felt we could leave for 4 months this summer. And what we have in the bookstore, because we've become a tourist destination, so George had made a life-size cardboard cutout of me.
Yeah.
And we call her Cardboard Judy very fondly, Cardboard Judy. And people come in and they want a photo, and they bring out Cardboard Judy. And she's great, because I wear a mask in the store. Cardboard Judy doesn't wear a mask. She's always smiling. So they are taking pictures with Cardboard Judy. And she's always in a good mood.
We've
Wait
got
a minute.
time.
Is there a dark side to Judy Blume who's not?
Yeah, there's plenty of.
Are there? I'm always wondering what's your secret. You're so warm and cheerful and a lot of energy. When I said we were in the hospitality suite over here, and I said to Judy, "So do you take the what do you call it, the shuttle back to the hotel?" And she said, "We walk."
Well, of course we walk.
Of course we
we're
walk.
able to, so we walk.
Yeah.
Everyone ages differently. What can I say? I don't want to be president. And I shouldn't be.
There's still time to convince her. The weekend's not over. Judy, thank you so much. Jeff,
oh, my
thank
God.
you.
Oh, I want to thank all of you. Thank you. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you.